Hey everybody, I can't believe it. We are on episode 20. Unbelievable for the short amount of time that we've been doing this. And today my guest is someone I have been so looking forward to talk to. Her name is Melia, and she is doing with music what very few people are doing. I love when you pause this podcast right now. Go to tinamelia.com, listen to her music, and let her voice and her music touch your heart, because you will feel like there are descending angels coming down from the heavens, from the quality and the purity of the sound of her voice. It's just absolutely exquisite. And we're going to talk about some of the things that are happening and why that's so important. But let me give you a moment just to get a background. Tina is a musical visionary in the world, dream pop and sacred chant communities, who embraces the heart through original compositions that elate and inspire. Her all-encompassing worldview and artistic perspective have led Tina to collaborations with iconic artists such as India Ari, Deva Premal, and Miten, Omar Farouk, Tekbilek. I don't even know how to say that. How do you say his name?
Tekbilek.
Tekbilek. There you go. And I'm going to just say Kenny Loggins. You'll see all the names that she has. She's played with all sorts of people. Tina's prodigious talent is evidenced by her self-produced catalog of albums. She has 7 of them already done, or you're working on your 7th?
Working on 7.
Working on 7, so 6 beautiful albums already done. Thrilled to be bringing her musical inspiration for the first time to communities everywhere. She's in Spain now, and we're about to doing concerts there. And she says music, through its sheer beauty, has the power to free the heart, uplift the soul, and connect communities all over the world. When we gather together to sing, dance, pray, and remember our connection to life and one another, we're touched by the simple acts of love moving through sound. I cannot think of a better way to spend my time than sharing this joy. That's what struck me. That's why I wanted to have her so much on this podcast. Winner of 4 Global Peace Song Awards, Melia's music has been acclaimed by audiences the world over, radio, press, and industry tastemakers. She's been written up in yoga journals. She got her sort of a changing moment with Jai Uttal. And she's appeared in Huffington Post, all that. Let's put all that aside. Those are beautiful accolades. You can find all that out on her website, tinamelia.com. Tina, welcome. And
thank you.
And thank you.
I like toast makers better than taste
makers, right? Instead of toast makers, right? I'm pumping around. I don't know what's happened, but recently for me, my life has changed so much because I've become more and more empathetic. And so I'm feeling a lot of the world around me in full mood, just literally play havoc with my being. I was up at 2 a.m. here and just sat and meditated and so I am not at my sharpest this moment, because even though I had a nice meditation. So let's get into it. I know your mother was a concert pianist, and I know your dad was from what you say, sort of a hippie like me in those days, and he was the one that first gave you a guitar. But what was the influence of both of them on your life? What did they bring to you that you now see as happening in your life?
Well, my mother brought me discipline. You know, she was a typical Korean piano master, teacher. And I always say that the rumors that you hear about Asian parents is totally true. And I was practicing the piano 4 hours a day when I was, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. And I didn't know I had a choice to stop until I was 12, at which point I stopped doing that. But by then the damage was done, and I had already had quite an education with music, which of course I'm just grateful every single day to have had that, not only that education, but what my mother taught me. You know, they say how you do one thing in the world is how you do everything. And what she taught me was to put care into every single note, every single pause. Every note was equally important, you know, whether it was a concerto or a sonata, it didn't matter. You know, I was never allowed to glaze over anything musically. I had to learn it equally as important, every single part of the music. And it taught me how to do that with life. And I'm very, very grateful for that level of attention, not only attention to detail, but caring about it. You know, how you play this note, this one note, it says everything. It gives you joy or it gives you longing, and you use all of those together to express the experience of life. So that was really what my mother gave me. My father really taught me about friendship and compassion. And he was, the roles were a little reversed. My dad was really more maternal in a sense. You know, I actually think I just called my mom teacher like everybody else.
Wow.
But he was the one that was very caring and kind, and kind of secretly allowed me to really explore who I was, because I was not a typical Korean concert pianist. I was this whole other soul, and he gave me the freedom to discover that. So yes.
And so growing up religion wise or spirit wise, what was that like for you? Were they both spiritual people? Was your mom more of uh like the music world, and your dad was like, where did you get your spiritual presence from, is what I guess I'm asking.
Um, they weren't particularly, my dad was not spiritual. My mother was, I would say she was a moderately practicing Christian. um, I think just some of us come here as souls with that kind of a longing, and you never know where it's going to come from. And for me, it just happened really young. At 15, I was in Denver, which is where I grew up, and I was downtown, and I was watching people go in and out of these office buildings, looking miserable, a lot of them, or not, maybe not miserable, but
Not happy.
something felt really like it was missing to me. And I didn't know anything else. You know, I didn't grow up in a spiritual community or a commune or anything. I grew up in the suburbs.
Yeah.
So I was like many of us from the Western world. I was I was taught that, you know, you go to school, you go to college, you get a job, you have a family, boom, that's life. And I just remember this day sitting there, and I felt like the whole world was collapsing, and I just felt this sense of just absolute dread. Just
Wow.
dread. And
Wow.
I was like, this can't be it. I will not accept that this is it. There's got to be more out there. And I just started this quest, and it led me everywhere, you know, and places I never ever thought I would go. And then I just became obsessed once I started kind of touching into, you know, who are we and why are we here and what is the purpose of all of this. And then I was just like a sponge, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's sort of beautiful because as you're hearing it, I'm a little bit empathetic, and I don't know if this is true or not, but what I hear is the training of your mom. Even as you moved away from what she was doing to the world around you, you left no note untouched. So as you got involved in this quest to find out what else was there, no, you just dove in, and you wanted every note to resonate with this new place. But was there a place of frustration that the world wasn't that way, or did you? I know from reading a little bit about you, you had sort of a hero's journey version. You know, you used to say you were going in a certain way, that crumbled, then you looked for something, and even when you found it, there was still this loneliness or emptiness there. Can you talk a little bit about
Absolutely.
that? Because so many people listening to this are in various stages of the hero's journey, right? And so
Of course.
I want them to hear your voice, because what's come from it is such a beautiful conclusion. But I want to get to the place where people are walking through.
Absolutely. Well, I sometimes I give these different classes and workshops on the power of mantra. And that's one of the first things I always say is I didn't come to these practices because I'm a more spiritual person or I'm a more developed person. I came to them because I wanted to die and I couldn't find anything in this world that gave me joy. And this was something that fulfilled me from the inside out. So if anything, it's the opposite. I came to it from a place of absolute need. And I think I've always been a very deep person. I was a very deep child. And like I've just said, I always wanted to know more and know more of, the purpose of life. And my mom died when I was 18. And of course that just brought this well of grief, this ocean of grief that I had no idea how to process. I mean, just none. And especially being that young and just popping out into the world at the same time. And so that coupled along with what I do feel like is just my own souls, as many of us go through, as I call it, the dark night of the soul, that I just, whoa, that sounded like Darth Vader.
We live
I
by
don't know
the
what that
beach.
was.
We live by the beach, and it's hot.
Nice.
We're in a hot spell here, and so the doors are open. But the military has helicopters that go up and down. I don't know why, but they're often just right over our rooftops. So
Nice. So it is Darth Vader.
Darth
Okay,
Vader is
cool.
there.
Anyway, so as I was saying, I just felt, well, it was a process that started,
Yeah.
I was already in a state of grief, and in a way it was interesting because all of my friends, they were also 18, 19, 20. I mean, we were just kids.
Totally.
And they were happy.
Yeah.
They were happy, and I wasn't happy.
Yeah.
And it was really poignant, that I wasn't and that they were. And that just made me feel even more like something was just really wrong with me. And I just kind of kept going down and down and down into these states of depression. And then really where the whole thing popped is that as many of us, I mean, all of us, maybe as humans on earth, we're searching for, we want to feel happy. We want to feel light. We want to feel good. So we unknowingly, we reach for things outside of ourselves that we feel are going to help us be happy. So, food or a movie or sex or whatever kind of other distractions that temporarily, drugs, alcohol, of course, all of those, that I forgot those. I knew there were more. Those are the only three things I could think of in the moment. Excuse me. And they work, and they do work temporarily, whether it's for 5 minutes or for 5 months. So I, like everybody else, was going through that process, and I would have my deep down lows, and then I would use something outside of myself in order to make me feel better, and it would. And then so I was just on this
roller coaster. Let me pause you for a minute.
Sure.
How deep were your down lows? Because a lot of the people I've talked to went into deep depression, have gone into mental homes, have gone, have been, but I don't get the sense that that's where you didn't go into an institution or weren't locked up or.
No, but I definitely planned suicide. I mean, I was there. Oh yeah. Many times.
What I really want to highlight, because looking at you now, where you are now, many people would never understand that was the path that got you here and that you had those thoughts.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I love in one of the songs that you wrote the silent awakening is when you speak about this world is not what it seems. And what the purpose of this podcast is to say the moments that we live in are just the moments we live in. And in any one moment, one connection, one thing, one change, one thing outside, one thing certainly inside can change, and everything in life changes. And so what I really want to just invite people to see is, no matter where you're listening from in this moment, to Tina's words, feel her feelings, feel what she's going through, feel what happened, and then allow yourself to, as she rises, rise with her. Because that's the beauty of what community does. It gives us hope again. And one of the things that really inspires me about your life, and I didn't know what your story was when I first heard your music. I think I heard Radha Guru for the first thing, but there was something in the quality of your voice that said, I know she knows pain. I can feel it. I can feel it in the resonance of her voice. And she's getting through that. She's gotten through it. No one's perfect, right? But we're moving all through that. So I really want to just highlight the roller coaster that life is, and highlight that where we are in any moment is only where we are in any moment. It's not where we are. It's just that moment. So continue on. What happened? So did you ever attempt suicide?
I actually did when I was 12. That's how, when I'm saying I was already as a child, I was very deep feeling. And at 12, I was already in, my mom was already very sick. I felt responsible. And I just was already going through, and who knows, how much of it's hormonal and all of these different things. But I did try when I was 12, and then I never tried again. But this particular dark night of the soul process I'm talking about, I definitely started planning again, and so continuing on, basically, I mean, there's so much to this, because there's all of us as individual souls and our individual life paths that we have here. And then there's the collective too. And from my perspective, particularly what has happened to humanity through the Industrial Revolution and Western culture, is that we've become so separate, and like I was saying from the very beginning, we're taught from a very young age what is normal. And especially living in this capitalistic society, we're really taught it's about me, it's about who I become and how successful I am and how much money I make. And we've so removed ourselves from the sense of community, the sense of family, of living in connection with nature. And so all of these things, I feel personally, is really what contributes almost more than anything to all of these, quote, mental health problems that people are having, because we think we're the problem. We think we're depressed and we're the problem, when actually maybe that's not even true. Maybe it's because we've become so removed from the things that really brought us true joy and love. And actually, that's what's not normal. That's not normal.
I love that.
So anyway,
and just so you know, I lost my dad when I was 13 years old, and I lost my mom when I was 15 years old, and they both passed away. They passed away on the same day, 2 years apart, July 4th. So I understand the place that you're talking to, and I think that even as we raise our kids now, I see that our world is very good at square pegs that fit in square holes.
Yeah.
But we're not very good with round pegs that don't fit in square holes. And we try and conform them, and even the round peg tries to conform so it can fit. But a round peg can never be happy in a square hole. It's not its resting place, right? And so instead of being taught to be original and live life as, like, the beauty of a mosaic to me, which is my book, is that every single piece is unique and different. Every single piece is a different shape. It can be broken, it can be whole, it can be a color or not a color, but every single piece is unique, and in the harmony of those pieces together, they create an artistry that is beyond imagination. You'd never think that these broken pieces would come together to create something so magnificent. And so let's fast forward a little, because I don't want you to, I don't want people to get stuck in the downhill of your story.
We're not going to stay there. No way.
Okay, good. and so when you look at the world that we live in now, and you feel its pain, because we're very, in one way, we're the most advanced, beautiful, connected world that's ever been. And in another way, we're the most divisive, divided, conflict-oriented world that's ever been too. What I think you've touched on with music is a vibration that goes above color of skin, religious practice, but what border you live behind, what religion you practice. I mean, maybe some Catholic Christians won't like chanting, right? Because it's of the East. But if you resonate on vibration, it elevates the conversation. And talk to me about how that happened for you. Let's go from where you were to your meeting with Jai Uttal.
Okay. That is this exact story. That's exactly where we are in this story. Well, I had moved out to California, and I'm going to just glaze over a little bit of the story here. I moved to California.
How old are you now?
I'm 18. I'm still 18. Maybe just turning 19. I moved to California because I was reading all these books, like Way of the Peaceful Warrior, Dan Millman, Starhawk, and I kept seeing all these people all live in Marin County, California. I'm like, what is this place, Marin County? I have to go. Right. So I got in my minivan. I went out there. I'm sleeping in the back of my van, just kind of waiting for some discovery, and I end up at this place called Open Secret Bookstore, which is in Marin County. No. And
hold on 1 minute. Where did you get the courage to do that?
Oh, I mean, I've always been a little bit, what is the word? I don't know if courageous is the word.
Free.
Somewhere between courageous and wild. Free. Let's stick with free.
Free, it's good.
Free, and I think, partially I was motivated by pain in a way, because I was such a seeker, and I really was determined to find these what I was looking for. And as I'm reading these different books from these different authors, I'm resonating with what they're talking about for the first time in my life, and I was just like, I need to go to the source. Like, I can't just keep reading books.
Yeah, California was like a mecca in those days. I still live in California. I've been here a long time. But it's changed now. But the California that I came to, the California that Joni Mitchell sings about, that California, I'm coming home, was such a beautiful place. And it still is, but it's not the same. Go ahead.
Yes, exactly. So I was there, I was at Open Secret, and someone said to me, do you want to come see this concert? It's this man, Jai Uttal. I said, sure. So we went. It was in Berkeley at Ashkenaz. And I walked in the door, and Jai was playing with the Pagan Love Orchestra at the time. And I just remember that everything felt like a warm blanket. The sound was like, I could almost see it in colors. It was like this orange color, the sound. And I just felt like I was home, and I didn't know anything about it. I'd never heard Sanskrit. I didn't know anything. And I just knew how it made me feel. Wow. And so I, of course, was, I think back to myself now, probably with Jai seeing me for the first time, this like little teenager, this little fangirl teenager. But I had some friends who knew I was a singer, because I, of course, was already singing by then. And they told Jai, you need to have this girl sing with you. Wow. So he did. I mean, he pretty much hired me on the spot. He said, I'm doing a recording. I need some backup singers. Why don't you just come? So I being Korean and having the education I did, I bought all his albums. I learned every word to everything he did.
You touched every
yeah,
stroke, right?
I did.
Every
I
note.
was ready. I had it all memorized. I was ready to go. And I arrived at his house, and we still do stuff to this day. I mean, and I started singing with him then, and then we became very close friends. I was kind of his main singer for quite a while, and we lived in a house together. So I lived on the bottom part of the apartment, and him and his wife Nubia lived up top. And okay, so now we'll go back into the dark night of the soul. So I have to take you down a little bit further, dear listener, and I promise we're going to go back up. So things just started getting worse and worse, and I started going through this.
Even with being with Jai Udall, it's still
because it didn't have anything to do with anything external in my life. It had nothing to do with anything external, and I think that's really important. At least for me, it's key, because I already had an album, I had tons of friends. I had already a blossoming life. From the outside of it, everything was great. But on the inside, I was starting to go through this process where every cell of my body was suffering. I felt empty. I couldn't derive joy from anything. And it was scary. It was really scary. And so what I was saying earlier about how, we use these different vices to bring us these temporary relief. So everything stopped working. Like one by one, they just stopped. And I was constantly in a state of agony. I mean, there's just no other word for it. I was in agony because how can I say it? I was longing for something that I couldn't find. It didn't exist outside, and every spiritual teacher talks about that. Every single one. Everyone says, oh, it's within. Well, great, but what does that really mean? And how does one really go about finding that? And I had every book. Possible, from like Paramahansa Yogananda to Pema Chodron, and just I remember one day looking through these books, searching for this relief. And I just felt like I should just burn these books. I mean, they're just useless. They're just words on a paper. Nothing is helping me. And so that was when I started this process of, again, kind of planning suicide, because I just felt like I couldn't exist here and I had nothing.
And is this 19 still, or is this now a little bit older? When is that? Around what time?
Maybe I think I'm a little older now. I think maybe because I met Jai and I started working with him. So now I'm probably 22, somewhere in there. I'm in my early 20s.
So let me pause for a minute and just highlight for the listener, because I think your journey is so relevant to people's journeys, because you've gone through this place where you had this pain early on as a kid. That pain sort of stayed with you. You lost your mom. Desperate pain, unbelievable pain. Probably pain you didn't even realize you had, because she went from teacher to mom to gone to whatever. And then you found your music, and you were doing your music, which is your calling, which is your purpose. And it gave you some measure of hope and some measure of love. And it then introduced you to a connection that opened up your world in some ways for you by being there and being around, and gave you some measure of joy. And then still the main issue, like the weed in the garden, hadn't gotten pulled from the root still. And so for people that are going through stuff in their life right now, what I want you to see is the story. Because even though you find the flower in the garden, it doesn't mean that the weed isn't still there. And you've got to get to that weed and pull it out, like the gardener in my book, The Mosaic. But that's another story. But I just want you to pause for a minute and see, how does your life correspond with Tina's right now? And then the question that I really want to jump to, and we'll get to it, I don't want you to shortchange your story, but I want to jump to the story of, with all that was going on, most people silo up. Most people put walls around them to protect themselves. Most people are scared to take the opportunities in front of them. but somehow it seems like you just leapt into those opportunities. And correct me if I'm wrong. Somehow it seems like, you know how many people are singers out there? You know how many people are doing what you're doing? And so few reach the level where you are now and the level that you're going to grow to even further. So what I want is sort of what became that magic ingredient. You can keep telling your story, but I want to know those moments in time where one connection changed something, or one thing happened to you that changed something, where you got the courage to go past your pain, to go past all the things that you saw, to go past all the things that didn't work, and to find that thing that did work. And was that a gift that was given to you, or a gift that you found, or that you saw?
Well, you make an interesting analogy, and I want to actually, for my story, I want to correct the analogy, because you use the analogy of pulling a weed out, which is interesting, you know, because it implies that there's something negative, let's say, that needs to be eradicated. And the analogy I want to use instead is, imagine you have like an empty swimming pool. I'm just going to say swimming pool for now.
Okay.
Okay, it's not a great analogy, but an empty pond. Let's say a pond, okay? And it's like, you want to have this pond full. So when the pond is full of water, you're full of joy, okay? So what we try to do is, you know, it rains and it fills temporarily, okay? Or we get like, you know, some buckets and we fill it in. All of this is filling it from the outside. What I needed to find was the well. I needed to find the well from the inside. I needed to dig that well so that the water was coming up from the inside and keeping that pond full. So it wasn't about removing anything, or that anyone's bad, or that any of us are doing anything wrong. It's that to do what, like I said, what every teacher talks about that I've ever read about, and is to find that well internally. So how do we do that? Okay, well, everyone has their different ways. I can only tell you my story, and I will tell the same story until the day I die, because this is the most powerful moment in my life, and it continues to be. And it's the day I found out how to dig that well. So I was downstairs in my apartment and crying all day, every day. I mean, I was a disaster. At that point, I was incapacitated. I could hardly function anymore. And Jai, being my dear friend and mentor, you know, and quite a bit older than me, and having been on this path for a lot longer than me also at that time, he very lovingly one stairs came down and he knocked on my door, and he said, he had a mala in his hand, with the beads, 108 beads, and he said, "Tina, have you ever tried doing japa?" You know, and through tears, I said, I don't know what that is, you know. And he said, "It's really, really easy. You take one bead and you just repeat. You're just repeating the name of God, and really you're just repeating love. You know, you're just saying." He said, "I use the mantra Ram, because that's what his teacher named Karoli Baba, who's also, you know, Krishna Das's guru, also Ram Das's guru. That was it. He just passed on this very simple word, Ram. And it's just an expression of love, you know." And he said, you know, maybe you should try it. And I said, okay, well, I had tried what I felt like was everything else at that point. So I started this practice of repeating mantra. And, you know.
So for people who aren't familiar with that, because I got my mala on, so I have some sense of that. But so he's given you this word Ram. Yeah. So are you just going Ram, 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 Ram? Tell me how you. That's it. That's what you're practicing.
But internally, for me, it was and is internal. Pardon. Internal, silent, not singing, nothing external. It's just the repetition of this word. And what started happening, you know, nothing. I just want to say, nothing happened for like the first week. Okay, right. Nothing. And right. I was doing it all the time. I mean, day and night, because I shouldn't say nothing happened, because one of the things that started happening is that part of the reason that we suffer so much, I mean, I say part of the reason, but really I want to say all of the reason is these ideas that we have, our mind, our mind is like these wild dogs, and they're just like, they're just going after whatever they can find, and they believe everything also, like this is going to happen and that's going to happen and I'm this person and I'm that, and it's just this constant thing, and every time one of these thoughts comes in, we have an emotional response to it. So what happened was that by giving my mind something, aside from letting it just roam free,
Right.
I gave it something that it was supposed to focus on. Okay.
So for people that are just listening now and thinking, I want to try this and I'm going to get started, I want to just get your thoughts, because I know the practice a little bit, and I know how important it is to guide our mind and not allow our mind to run rampant. And yet, as you were saying Ram over and over, day and night, was your mind still getting caught in its restless thoughts, and you would lose that and come back to it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Of course.
So that's what's going to happen until a certain period of time. For you, it took a week. Is that what you're saying? Or?
No. I mean, geez, it's taken me, it's not like it doesn't still happen. It's just, it started as a mental process. Okay. So it started helping me mentally, but I was still in all this agony and pain. So, my mind was a little more still, but I was still really depressed and going through it. But with the continuation of this practice, and I will say, I never really used the mala beads. I just did it. I would chant Ram while I was driving, while I'm brushing my teeth, while I'm cooking, while I'm eating. Sometimes I would just start bawling uncontrollably, and then also just staying with it, just stayed with it,
and without intruding in your space, give us 10 seconds of how that would be for you. I know you were doing it mentally, but verbalize it so people can hear it, the cadence of it, the speed of it.
Ram, 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 just like that.
So
you get bored too, of course it's boring also. It's not glamorous, but that's the whole idea, is it, we're so sensationalist, we want all these things, we want it now, we want to feel good, we want to feel that, and it just stops everything, because they say mantra is a form of silence. So really it's just and I love it because it's an easier form of silence, because silence is hard. Mantra at least gives you somewhere to be, so it helped me. It just started calming me down. It started helping. First it started calming me, and then eventually one day I felt this little tickle in my heart, and it was about the size of a grain of sand. And it was the only place that it didn't hurt. And I saw it, and it was like a light. I saw it, internally as I'm doing this practice. And it wasn't even just a grain of light. It was like, it was happy. It was a little piece of joy. And I was like, what are you? Who, what? Wait, what's that? I didn't even know what it was really. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to keep going with this because something's happening. And so then I just continued this practice, but now I was focusing this practice on that little piece of light in my heart. And as I practiced and chanted, and I did this meditation over and over and over, it started growing. I mean, it literally, physically started growing. And that's important because we live in bodies, it's not just all mental. Like, I'm a very visceral person. I need to feel something. Yeah. I can't just think about it. And so it helped me feel joy. And it was just really little. And then it just started growing and growing and growing. And I remember one day, I just started smiling. A part of me was like fighting against it. I'm like, you're depressed. You shouldn't be smiling. I'm like, but I am, and oh no, this is working. Like, and so I kept doing this practice, and it's for me, this practice, I say the word practice and it makes it sound very, what's the word I'm looking for? It makes it sound kind of generic, but, oops, are you still there?
Yeah,
My
now I
battery
see. Yeah.
just, oh, my battery's going to die. We'll deal with that in a moment. It makes it just sound kind of bland, but I assure you it's not. It was, it was like I started that pool that I wanted, that love that I wanted, that feeling of love that I wanted. I wanted a best friend.
Yeah.
I wanted a best friend. I wanted
I love
someone to love. I wanted someone that loved me.
Yeah.
From the inside,
Yeah.
And that Ram, okay, it's a word, we can go into all of the scholarly meanings of all of it, but really you're calling God. You're calling God. You're calling God. And sometimes I would be like mad. I'd be like, Ram, 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 Ram. Like, come on now. Like, I can't take this much longer. When are you going to show up in my life? Like, I need this. I need it now. If you're real, I need you now.
Yeah.
And it wasn't immediate, but it did come. It absolutely did. And it's still totally with me.
So one of the things, I just want to paraphrase and see if I've got it, because I think I do, but I want you to correct me like you did before, because I want this to be what happened for you, okay? And I love this expression. We live in a sensationalist mind. We have all these senses going through and all these interruptions and all this conflict and all this noise and the simple utterance of one word, of course it's going to be boring. But it's boring because it's quieting. And quieting is really the practice, but it seems boring to a mind that's restless and wants to just blah 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 and move. But the concentration on one word or one mantra or one thought, I'm seeing like beautiful white light around your head right now, but really it's beautiful. But the concentration of just that on that, allow yourself to experience the boring, because in the boring becomes the silence. And in the silence becomes the peace. And in that, as that peace, P-E-A-C-E, becomes a P-I-E-C-E, like a mosaic piece, that piece starts to grow. And as the P-I-E-C-E grows, the P-E-A-C-E grows. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely.
And so the process you described, although I can see your frustration, Yogananda has a beautiful song that he wrote. It's keep calling him. Whether he replies or not, keep calling him. Even if there's no reply, never let your longing die. Keep calling him. And that's, to me, the practice that you were talking about, of just, sometimes I was just mad. And I would say, come on, Ram, come on. Like, don't abandon me here, right? But in that just simple practice of staying focused on one thing, all the other noise has to stop, because the focus becomes so strong. And I see your mom smiling, because that concentration on making every note right is sort of living in your soul as you did this practice of just, even if it didn't feel right, I'm just going to sit here. I'm just going to keep saying it. I'm going to keep doing it. And the surprise comes. It doesn't come because we have a business deal with it. It comes when we least expect it. And so I'm so enamored with the story and the honesty of your story. And so if we can transition that, like, you're charming, if we can transition that place of Ram into now the place of the voice of mantra, did your voice quality change? Did you notice your voice was always the same?
Yeah.
Because I hear in your music a resonance of presence of heart that I don't necessarily hear in all your speaking. I've listened to a couple of your talks, but there's a resonance that comes when you chant that brings you right to your heart. And sometimes in your words, you're still in your, like all of us, where we speak from our mind, or we speak, right? I don't mean it in any way. It's not that it's bad or good. It's just like I can feel the difference in the presence of when you sing, because it's so pure. There's a purity there that's untouched by this restlessness of mind. And so I'm wondering how that came, or if you feel that even happened for you.
I mean, in a way, you know, I feel like, you know, it did come from the pain in some sense, because it does, and it did come from that longing, because as I'm doing this practice, I wasn't just wanting peace. That my goal wasn't peace. I wanted love. I wanted love. I want to feel that experience of the love that I felt was missing internally, as all of us do. Of course, it's natural, you know. And they say, the wise sages say, you know, we're blessed if you get to even know about the practice of chanting mantra in your lifetime, in this lifetime, because it does have the ability to fill us on such a deep level, you know. And it's also kind of like, I see it as like a little baby bunny. You know, if you're out in a field and you see this little baby bunny, I mean, you can't coax it, you know, you can't yell at it, come on, like, you just have to create a space that is so gentle and quiet and safe for it that it can come to you. And I feel that is in a similar way what the practice of mantra has been also. It's like quieting everything until we're able to actually hear it and receive it. And that takes a while. Like I said, I've been saying this whole talk, you know, that especially now, I mean, especially living in cities and all the ways we travel and everything, we're filled with so much, you know, that we've lost a lot of that simplicity. So first we have to let go of so much and then return to a place of simplicity. And then with whatever practice you're doing, you know, and I say to people, I think, you know, if you don't like the word Ram, I mean, do it. You could repeat the word love, because I do feel like it's the practice of calling it, you know, it's retraining our minds also, from existing in a place of suffering and letting our minds go wild to focusing it on what it is that we really want to fill ourselves with. So just saying to any listeners out there, and I've had this conversation a lot, you know, that if you want to try it, but you don't have any resonance with the Hindu tradition, that's fine. Just try it with the word love and see what it does. It's transformational. It really is. And gosh, yeah. Anyway, to move on to your question about music, I mean, music is magic. Music bypasses the mind. It doesn't really have much to do with the mind. And I feel like the combination of music itself as an entity and prayer, you know, whether it's words in English that are uplifting, or Hebrew prayers, or Sanskrit, or Christian, or whatever, that combination is, I mean, I have no words for it. I'm trying to think of one and they all sound so cheesy. I'm going to go with magical. Yeah. You know, they're magic. They're so healing.
Yeah, it's almost beautiful because there are no words for it, because it's above the level of words. Yeah. And our words are what causes a lot of our problems. So it's so interesting to me that what I'd like to do is transition a little bit, segue a little bit into how the practice that I was at Hay House for a lot of years. I was a director of business development.
Oh, wow.
And we grew, during the time that I was there, the company grew from $3 million to $100 million a year, in large part because we developed formulas and things that worked, and we drew to us the people that were the right people to come. But one of the magical parts of their story was we looked at a book that Louise wrote called You Can Heal Your Life. And the formula that she had was, this is what happened to me. I had this, I saw that each affirmations were really important. I started practicing them and I started to heal myself from things that were problematic. And that gave her and her technique credibility. Then the next part of what happened is she said, then I went out and started talking to people and I started to share the technique with them. And what happened is they started to heal themselves too. Not everybody was healed, but the quality of the life that they lived was better, even in the remaining days that they had. If they passed, they passed. Everybody passes. But their quality of life in that course of time changed. And so what was originally something that just worked for me is now working for everybody else. And so that gave that some power.
Mm-hmm.
But what really anybody, unfortunately, all anybody really cares about is what it's going to do for me. And so in the third part of the book, what she said is, now this is what it's going to do for you. And this is how you can do it. And this is what will happen for you. And so in the evolution of where you are with mantra, with music, clearly it has impacted you in a huge way. The first part of that we've talked about, right? What I'd like to do is segue a little bit into the second part and hopefully into the third part, so that we can give to the world something that they can say, this is in a world of chaos, in a world of noise, in a world of conflict, in a world of confusion, in a world where we are disconnected from everything, including nature and the very essence of who we are. This simple practice will do this. Just practice it. And so that's the place that I'd like to take in the next 10, 15 minutes that we have, because I think that's so exciting. And I think it puts you not only as a musician, but also as somebody that can help me, my listeners, your listeners, anybody that's listening to this, say, hold it, this is a simple practice. It's not easy, but it's simple, right? And if you just practice this practice, just have the faith, just practice it. And you'll get mad, you'll get upset, you'll want to give up, you'll want to say no. That's okay, just keep going. And if it resonates with you, just keep going more. And I love the curve of your story, the roller coaster of your story, because you were practicing it and then you went down, and you practiced it, you went down, and so what would you say now to people out there who are ready to, first of all, how have you seen it affect the people in your concerts? How have you seen it affect the people in your workshops? What are people saying to you when you share this and get back to you afterwards? Do you have that experience?
Well, I think people are I'd love to share my story, and I'd like to share it very blatantly as I have, because I think a lot of people feel that spirituality is something you have to be special to attain, or you have to wear a certain thing or look a certain way or have a certain spiritual name. And I just don't believe any of that, because it's really between you and yourself. And these are just tools, and this is just a tool. And of course it's a tool, obviously, that's worked for me. So of course I want to share it. That's my favorite thing to do. Because it's been so simple and so effective, and it healed me from depression without drugs, without therapy, without hospitalization. And I mean, when I say it healed me, I mean it healed me. Totally. It didn't just glaze over it, because it's been like I said, from the inside out. So I would say, for starters, one of the things I did was I would put on a timer, because I better now, but I was very impatient, and I want everything now, just like everybody. And so I put on a timer for 10, 15 minutes. And so that I know for that amount of time, this is what I'm going to focus on every single day. I mean, my God, if you can't spend 10 minutes of 24 hours trying to better your state of existence, then call me personally, and we'll do it together. But really,
you're gonna get a lot of calls. They tell a story. They tell a story of Zen, and the guy comes to the Zen teacher to learn Zen, and the teacher says, you have to sit for 10 minutes. And he comes back 2 weeks later and he says, how was your sitting? He said, I couldn't do it. I couldn't sit for 10 minutes. He said, then if you can't sit for 10 minutes, do it for 2 hours. And the kid looked at him and said, well, hold it. I can't do it for 10 minutes. He said, then you really need to practice for 2 hours so that you can do it for 10 minutes. And
exactly.
It's so simple, but it's not so easy. And what I love about the story that you tell is that it doesn't have to be easy. Just believe. If you believe with the faith, and if this is yours, and it resonates what Tina's saying, just practice it. You don't have to, like, forget about the noise of your head that's telling you not to be happy. That's what it wants to tell you. What you want to hear now is how do I change that? How do I disrupt that pattern that causes me unhappiness? Because we can either continue what we're doing or disrupt it. And if we
And it's like it is a practice like anything else. You know, if you want to be a good swimmer, I mean, you have to get in the pool and do it. It's not just going to happen. And so we think that, oh well, we should just be happy and we should just be joyful. And but you know, for whatever reasons that have brought you collectively, as all of us listeners, to the point where you feel like, you know, we've all been victims of everyone has been a victim of some pain and some suffering and something someone's done to us or they've left us. Fine. Just set that aside for that time period, 10, 20 minutes, 2 hours, whatever it is. Don't try to figure it out. Just leave yourself a period of time where you're not trying to figure anything out and just can,
it's okay.
Plug us in soon. Just use this practice to call on something deeper and trust it. And just for that time period, just, you know, and of course, as you're sitting there, you know, sometimes you're like, this isn't working, nothing's happening. Like, just do it anyway. Just do it and then do it the next day, you know? And for me, I wish I could just describe in words. I can't to you. I can't describe. It hasn't just brought me peace. It hasn't just brought me well-being. It's brought me the most incredible sense of love that I could never even experience externally. That now I know that, and now I know why I was looking so hard and why nothing worked. It wasn't supposed to work. It wasn't supposed to. I was supposed to have it from the inside. We all are, you know. And now, and I still have my ups and downs. I mean, I went through it this week, you know, and I spent 2 days kind of super sad and, you know, kind of feeling sorry for myself. And by the end of the second day, I was like, you know, Tina, you know, there's only one way out of this, right? You know it. You know there's only one way out. One. And I had to go, and I sat and I did a really long practice. And for me now, because I've touched that space so consistently over almost 20 years, you know, that it comes to me quickly. It comes quicker. And that's the most we can ask for, you know, is that we can come out of things quicker but we have to give ourselves that it's like you're training for a marathon. So we have to train ourselves to be happy and be joyful. And I think that it's taught in other cultures maybe, and it's just not in ours as much. So don't be so hard on yourself. It's not that you're a bad person. It's not that you've done anything wrong. It's not that all these things have hurt you. I mean, sure, they have, but the beauty of this practice is that so I'm going to use one more analogy that I like to use a lot, and is that, you know, I felt like I was like swimming in tar. Okay. So imagine you're like swimming in mud and you're trying to get yourself clean. I mean, how do you get yourself clean if you're constantly living in it, you know? So what the practice of mantra did for me, it was like every time I would recite this word, it was like this golden rope came out of the sky, little by little by little. Finally, with every time, it finally came to me. I was able to hold on to it, and I just held on to it for dear life. I mean, I didn't do anything special. I mean, I couldn't have. I'm powerless to. I just held on to this rope with dear life and kept chanting. And as I chanted and continued to, it just through its own power lifted me out of it. Yeah. So it's not about trying to fix everything in here. That in itself fixed it. And so from this place of cleanliness and clarity, of course, I still have all kinds of things. I'm still human. Everything happens to me in the same way it happens to everyone else. But I do feel, to answer an earlier question that you had also, is that has given me an immense amount of strength. Of course, it's given me an immense amount of strength to be able to have confidence in my projects. I mean, I'm still human. I still go through all of the same things of comparing with other people. And, I'm not different than anybody else. I just have this tool that when I start to get too low, I can grab onto it and it brings me right out, and it brings me back to a place of joy. And I mean, what greater gift could I ever possibly talk about to anybody else ever?
Completely.
So
first of all, thank you for being so open. Thank you for being so vulnerable. Thank you for sharing from the depth of your own experience, what you've gone through, what life is like for you, and how this simple, not easy, simple practice has literally elevated you above where some of the conversations the world is living in sometimes exist, and allows you to see from a clearer, from a sort of an unobstructed place, because you're not caught in the noise of it. And I think I already know the answer to this question, but it's the question I ask every time to end the podcast. And it comes down to this simple idea: in the world that we live in today, is this the world that you always dreamed of giving over to future generations? Is this the world that you always thought, this is the world I want to hand over to my kids and my children's children?
You're gonna end with that, Danny?
That's the fun.
You're like, not a big question or anything, but
that's right, not a big question.
Sorry, everyone, my little thumb here.
That's okay.
My phone. No, it's not at all. It's not at all. I feel very sad about what's happening in the world right now. I feel very sad about it, and at the same time, of course, there's so much beauty. I mean, totally. I love the earth so much. I'm very connected to nature. I am nature. I am nature. There's no distinction. Not everyone feels that way, but I am, and I mean, we all are, but
you feel it,
have that. And so everything that's happening right now is absolutely devastating. I mean, I go through all kinds of feelings. Sometimes I feel like, well, maybe it's okay if humans go extinct and we all start over again, maybe that's what's going to happen. Can I change that? Of course, I'll do everything I can to bring joy and elevation and all of these things and fight for Mother Earth. But that may not be my choice. That's something I've had to acknowledge. Go ahead.
So here's what I want to do is, you might not be old enough to remember overhead projectors, but when I was growing up, there was an overhead projector, and you put a little piece of plastic with a drawing on it, on a machine that had a light underneath it, and it broadcast the image onto the room in front of us. And then you would be able to put another plastic sheet on top of that, and that would put both the images on there, and you would see how things would interact or interrelate or whatever. So I want to take the statement that we've just been talking about. Because the reason I asked the question last is because I say, if we continue going in the way we're going, we know what the result's going to be. Like, if this isn't the world we want to hand over to our kids and our children's children, if we don't do anything about it and we don't come together and create a new change, this will be the world we hand over to them unequivocally. But if it's not the world, then we have to do something. And what I hear in your story, and again, you correct me because I'm always interpreting it, and I want it to be your story, okay? But what I hear in your story is the same depression sort of syndrome that you started out with, is the depression syndrome that the world's in right now. And that maybe with the simple act of mantra, with the simple act of just clearing out all the noise, with the simple act of just saying the name of God in whatever form you call him or her, whatever way it relates to you, even if you don't want to call it God, you want to just call it love. If we just simply focus on the thing that we do want, rather than on the things that we disagree on and the things that we don't want, would that be enough to start an evolution of consciousness that would allow us to come together in a way that we could Because what we can do together, we can't do on our own. We have unlimited power.
Absolutely.
Right? And so if all of us were to just quiet the noise somehow, and that's part of what I'm doing, and I'd love under separate cover, not on here, but to just sit with you and talk with you about how we can play together to sort of bring to the world this place where together we can accomplish gazillion times more than we can with the solo mind. And do you think it would be possible if people were to right now just decide, if people were right now to just decide that they are going to do, oh my God, this won't shut up. I set the alarm. I set the alarm. Shut up. Okay. If people would just, that's the noise. That's the noise of the world that we set on purpose, right? To make us stop on time. But do you think if we were to get people to unify around the simple practice of japa, the simple practice of saying the name of God, what do you think the world would be the same world it is today?
Well, how much time do I have to answer this question? Tell me that first.
You can have however long you want. We'll just overrun.
I have two parts to this. The first one is that if you're familiar at all with any sacred Hindu text, they talk about these different eras that we live in, okay, these different epochs, and that we are in what's right now called the Kali Yuga.
Well, we just changed it. According to Sri Yukteswar, he says we've just moved. We're about 300 years into Dwapara Yuga right now, but Kali Yuga is the Yuga of form. But go ahead. We're still in the lowest level.
We're in a low level. You know,
right.
Basically, it's this time of selfishness, of materialism, of ego, and so we as humanity, we're in this cycle. So that actually gives me, I'm not going to say it gives me hope as much as it just helps me understand, you know, whether whatever is true or not. And I personally do believe that, based on also what I've seen and what's happening right now, that is where we are. So that just gives you a better sense of like, okay, there's life, there's birth, there's life, there's death, there's decay, and that's all part of these natural cycles. So we are in some ways part of a natural cycle. We live for 100 years, so we think we're super important, but actually this is a very, very, very long cycle that's happening on planet Earth. So I have faith in that. I really do. That even if we are going through even if we have to go through a big cleansing on the planet, even if whatever happens, the most ugliest of ugly things, that I do feel a lot of them are happening now, that is just part of this cycle of decay, and that there will be a cycle of rebirth. I may not be alive to see it, but I'm okay with that. So that's one part of what I want to say. Another part of what I want to say is, you know, what you asked me is, are you leaving the kind of world that you feel like you would want to pass on to your children? On the greater sense, you know, I said no. But on an individual sense, what I've decided is most important is to live in community, to live in villages again, to be growing our own food organically, to be being able to sustain ourselves in villages, essentially, to have clean water, to be taking care of each other. And so I actually recently, in the last couple of years, moved to a community that we are doing exactly that. And it's amazing. And it has brought, I do feel like it's how humans should live. I think we're supposed to live tribally. We're not supposed to live so individually with our own individual, you know, we're always just so concerned about me, which I also feel, on a side note, is why so many of us are depressed all the time. So coming back to this sense of togetherness and family, and that I take care of you, and by me taking care of you, I am taken care of, because you are all going to take care of me. And so I am living in that, and I would be very happy to pass on to anyone, to children or friends or family, this kind of experience. And I feel very lucky to have that. And I feel even more than, you know, mantra for me and the practice of japa, for me, that's all very individual. If it's something that you feel really called to, it's not something I would ever push on someone, or frankly, that I even talk about much unless I'm asked. Because I feel like people's spiritual journey it's really theirs, it's individual. But as far as planetary, absolutely. I feel that what we need more than anything, for me, the most important thing is that we really come back together as small communities that are attached to larger communities. But I'm in a community now of 140 people. I know everyone's names. I know all of their kids. I know where everyone lives. And, we really take care of each other. And I didn't grow up that way. Maybe most of you probably didn't either if you grew up in the Western world. I mean, do you know all of your next door neighbors? Probably not. Yeah. So to know each other and to really care about each other, I think that will be the thing that will, hopefully we're all going to move into, because we're going to need to, so that involves also, like I said, food production is a big one, food and water, but really just stepping outside of ourselves and caring about each other. I think that's the only thing that's going to save us.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for all your time. Thank you for taking time away from your concert schedule in Spain to talk with us and give us your time and your beauty, your beautiful story, your beautiful vibration, and the love of your art. I understand you. I think from inside, I understand you. I spent 20 years living in cooperative community, and I understand what that's all about. And one of the things that the Mosaic is teaching me, the book that I wrote, is teaching me that whereas like-minded, and I want you to ponder this. I would love to, if you want to respond, I'm happy to have you respond and have you have the last word, because I'm not attached to any of this, okay? But one of the things that I find is that when I found my like-minded community originally, I felt like a fish out of water who finally found my pond. And it felt so invigorating and so alive and so fabulous to just be with a group of people that supported me and held me and knew me inside and out.
Yeah.
As I look at the world now, what I see is those silos of like-minded communities are actually not as, it's sort of like we were talking about California. California used to be that dreamland for me of where I always wanted to be. And as I look at it now, it's no longer quite that place. And what's happening is that these like-minded communities are becoming stronger and stronger, which is beautiful. But the gaps between this like-minded community and this like-minded community are growing wider and deeper. And I call them silos. And those silos between us are what's causing us to experience a world of duality rather than a world of oneness. And my dream in the Mosaic is bring together people of like and unlike mind. And we can still grow food and we can still have clean water and we can still have, but the innovation that comes when we sit together with unlike minds, where we open ourselves up to ideas that are not like what we always think. Because change happens when we finally see something that we didn't see before. And if we keep seeing the world that we all see together, we very rarely see the world that we haven't seen. And I call it the 359. We look at a 360 world from one point of view, one perspective, and it's 1 degree. But there's the other 359 that's out there. And the more that we can hear the 359, we don't have to agree with it. We don't have to accept it. We don't have to validate it. But we do, if we listen to it and we start to find, how do we find unity between all these different pieces? When you look at a mosaic, the pieces aren't all together like this, side to side.
Sure.
Sometimes they're just connected point to point. There's a very small part of connection that connects, but that connection upholds the mosaic. It keeps it all connected. So rather than find those places where we have differences, if we could find those places where we have similarity. And sometimes that means walking out of our like-minded community and just holding and loving somebody who you would never even think to do that to.
Absolutely.
And so
absolutely.
I love your openness. I love your receptive. I definitely would love to further conversation with you and have this be a start, not an end. And if that feels right, I'm sure we'll find a way to do that. So But for everybody listening, tell us again how they can find you, where they can hear your music, what they can do. I'll post all of it in the show notes below too.
Sure, tinamelia.com, Malia. And you can find me on YouTube and Spotify. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, you know, all the places I'm supposed to be.
Great.
And I'm there, and I love you, and keep going, and keep going. Just keep going.
And I don't think I can recommend highly enough how important it is to just listen to some of her music. Her music will touch your heart and open your soul in a way that very few things can. So I really want to ask everybody listening just to listen to it, buy it, support her, and find a way to integrate into the world that she lives in, into the world that you live in. With that, we'll see you next time. Tina, thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Big love and big blessings.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, everyone.